and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we are going to be going over my second NFL mock draft. I'm by no means professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. For this podcast episode, picks are being made in the way that I would make them. These picks are all made as if I am the general manager of each team. These aren't the picks I think the team should make or will make. It's just what I think this is just what I would do if I was in charge of each team. And this mock draft will also have 0 trades. I will have one coming out very soon with trades involved, but I figured let's start with no trades and go from there. So with the first overall pick, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Aiden Hutchinson, an edge rusher out of Michigan. The Jaguars are bad. I mean, obviously they're picking at number 1, so they're a really, really bad team. So I think they take arguably the best player in this draft and arguably the best edge rusher in this class. He killed it at Michigan this year and was one of the best, if not the best defensive player in the entire nation. I know that Jordan Davis actually got that award, but Aiden Hutchinson's production was just insane. He didn't single-handedly carry Michigan to the playoffs, but it was pretty close. So I think the Jaguars, for a team that's just not a whole lot of talent on that team, they just go with Aiden Hutchinson, probably one of the safest picks in the entire class. And head coach Doug Peterson loves his trench guys, so give him Aiden Hutchinson and we'll see what he can do. Pair him alongside Josh Allen, and I think that's a really scary young pass rush duo. With the number 2 overall pick, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Travon Walker, an edge out of Georgia. Now, this is probably a surprising pick for some people because a lot of people think Kayvon Thibodeau is edge 2, but I have Travon Walker. He came out and he absolutely killed it at the combine. There's no reason a guy of his size should run and perform as athletically well as he did. He killed it. And the Lions, like the Jaguars, just don't have a whole lot of talent on their team. So I think they take arguably the edge rusher with the most upside. I think he has probably some of the most upside of any edge rusher in this class. He's still not a super defined edge rusher. His production isn't great. But I think Detroit's not looking to win this year or maybe even next year. So get a guy on the roster that can develop and just get snaps right away and can hopefully be one of the top edge rushers in the league in a couple years if you're Detroit. With the number 3 overall pick, the Houston Texans select Ahmad Gardner, a corner out of Cincinnati. He's the best cornerback in the entire class. Didn't allow a single touchdown in college, and at the combine at 6'3", I think, he ran unbelievably fast. Like, I could not believe a guy that big and that long ran as fast as he did. So for the Houston Texans, I mean, it's going to be a trend for a lot of these teams picking at the top of the first round. They don't have a lot of talent, and the Texans are, I think they're kind of the definition of no talent, especially after trading Deshaun Watson to Cleveland. But their secondary is really, really bad. I mean, Desmond King is their best DB, and he's not great. I wouldn't put him as a top 10, top 15, maybe even top 20 defensive back in the league. So get Ahmad Gardner, who can immediately step in and be your cornerback 1 for potentially the next 10, 15 years. And he's just a building block for that defense that doesn't really have a lot of talent. Jonathan Grenard performed really well in his rookie year, really surprisingly well. I didn't really expect him to come out like he did. So get Ahmad Gardner, who can help start the rebuild of that secondary just because it is really, really bad. With the 4th overall pick, the New York Jets select Kayvon Thibodeau, an edge rusher out of Oregon. Now, this probably could be an offensive lineman, but I have them going with Kayvon Thibodeau simply because I don't trust what they have for pass rushers right now. I don't think either of their defensive ends are great. And if they get Kayvon Thibodeau, who for a couple of years was regarded as maybe the best pass rusher in this entire class, if not the best player in this class, and then didn't really perform well, and he kind of just fell down the rankings. But I think if they can get a blue chip prospect in Kayvon Thibodeau to help rush the passer. He's just another guy that can immediately start for them and can be a really key piece in the rebuild that they are trying to go through at the moment. At pick 5, the New York Giants select Ikem Ekwonu, a tackle from NC State, arguably the best offensive lineman in the entire class, and the Giants' offensive line is awful. I know they did sign Mark Glowinski and I think John Feliciano this year in free agency, but I think Ekwonu could come in and probably be their best or second best offensive lineman. He'd probably slide in and immediately start at right tackle with Andrew Thomas at left tackle, and then the Giants would have their tackle pairing of the future, and that is super important if you're trying to develop Daniel Jones or whoever the guy to replace him is going to be. I just think for them it needs to be the best player available, and at the moment I think it's Ikem Ekwonu. At number 6, I have the Carolina Panthers selecting Evan Neal, a tackle out of Alabama. Now, you could easily flip-flop Ekwonu and Neal, but I have Neal going to Carolina at pick 6. He's, I think, 6'7", 340 pounds. He's an absolute monster, like one of the biggest, most athletic offensive linemen you're probably ever going to see come out in the draft. And for Carolina, who's starting left tackle at the moment is Cameron Irving, you need a replacement. You need someone who is an instant upgrade, and Evan Neal is that guy. He'll instantly be a starter for left tackle, and he will be the blindside protector for whatever quarterback they have, whether it's Sam Darnold or if they select a quarterback in this year's draft, that remains to be seen. But I think if they can get a best player available like the Giants did at pick 5, you're only making your team better. With the number 7 overall pick, the New York Giants select Kyle Hamilton, a safety out of Notre Dame. Now, he didn't test great this year. I don't know exactly why. I heard a little bit about an injury, but I'm not really sure how true that was. But the guy's a freak, like 6'4", just over 200 pounds, I think. But he plays extremely fast, extremely physical. He'll probably be more of a box safety linebacker hybrid for them. But they did lose Jabril Peppers this year in free agency, and I don't really trust Julian Love to be a starting safety. I love Xavier McKinney, but I think they need another guy back there, and Kyle Hamilton can immediately step in and be their starting safety. With the number 8 overall pick, I have the Atlanta Falcons selecting Garrett Wilson, a wide receiver out of Ohio State. He is arguably, well, depending on who you ask, he is the number 1 receiver in this year's draft class. I didn't really watch a lot of Ohio State games, so I'm just kind of going off of what other people say, but he is an extremely smooth route runner. He plays the ball really well, and for a team that Olamide Zaccheaus is their current number 1 receiver with Calvin Ridley out for the year, they just need an upgrade immediately for Marcus Mariota, and regardless of what they do with Calvin Ridley after this year, Garrett Wilson can be their number 1 receiver for years to come. With the number 9 overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks select Malik Willis, a quarterback out of Liberty. This probably should be an offensive lineman just because their offensive line is awful, but I don't trust Drew Lock. I don't trust Jacob Eason to be my starting quarterback for a full 17 game season. So I go out and I take arguably the best quarterback in the entire class. He is a little bit raw, not super pro ready, but he showed out at the combine and at his pro day, and I think he kind of secured his spot as quarterback 1. And after trading Russell Wilson, Seattle now gets their quarterback of the future that can either pair well with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, or can pair well with whoever they have at receiver, because I know there's talks about them trading DK or Tyler Lockett, but that remains to be seen. So I think Malik Willis can immediately step in and be a starter to replace Russell Wilson. With the number 10 overall pick, the New York Jets select Drake London, a wide receiver out of USC. This is another guy that could be considered wide receiver 1, but he is, I think he's like 6'5", 220 or something, extremely athletic, and unfortunately he didn't get to play a full season because of a broken ankle, I believe. But in his 8 games I think he played, his stats were unreal. I think he had close to 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and like 8 touchdowns or something in 8 games. Stats that a lot of receivers don't have in a full season. He had in only 8 games. So I think the Jets go out, they get their big-bodied guy for Zach Wilson, and I think he'll pair really well with Elijah Moore, who is a smaller, more slot-type guy, but Drake London, I think, is arguably I think Drake London, in my opinion, is probably the best receiver in this class just because of the things he can do with his body. So the Jets go out and take what will probably be their wide receiver 1 or 2 for years to come. With the 11th overall pick, the Washington Commanders select Charles Cross, a tackle out of Mississippi State. Their left tackle at the moment is Charles Leno, and I think he's like 32, 33, so he's not really their future at left tackle. So they go out and get Charles Cross, who is arguably the best pass protector in the entire class. Get him in there to protect Carson Wentz or whoever their quarterback is going to be for the future. This year is going to be Carson Wentz, but who knows what's going to happen after that. So I think it's just kind of a safe pick. It's a smart pick. Go out and get the best tackle remaining who can help shore up that offensive line that is extremely bad. With the number 12 overall pick, the Minnesota Vikings select Derek Stingley Jr., a cornerback out of LSU. A guy who was regarded as probably the best corner or best player in this class since his freshman year, and who, if he was able to come out in his freshman year, he probably would have been a top 5 pick. But he hasn't really played well since then, and I don't think he's tested at all this year. So that's why he's falling. But Minnesota, I think, needs to run. If I'm Minnesota, I run the card up to the commissioner, and I take Derek Stingley without even questioning. He can be your number 1 or number 2 corner for years to come. He is extremely athletic. I think he's like 6'1", 6'2", maybe. So he has the size, he has the length. And for a team that just needs to get better because their secondary is not good, get Derek Stingley and you can figure the rest out from there. With the number 13 overall pick, the Houston Texans select Devontae Wyatt, a defensive tackle from Georgia. This is probably a surprising pick for a lot of people because defensive tackle isn't a super valuable position, I don't think. But Devontae Wyatt killed the combine, killed his pro day, just came out and he rose his draft stock probably more than a lot of people. Well, he did. He raised his draft stock a lot more than a lot of people in this draft class and a lot of people in the first round. So like with, who did I have them taking earlier? Ahmad Gardner. They just need to take the best player available. He may not be the best player available, but he fits a need for that team and he can instantly come in and start. I don't think that team really has a lot going for them on the defensive line. So get Wyatt, who is probably the best pass rushing defensive tackle in this entire class, and just let him go to work, let him play, let him develop. And you might have not a J.J. Watt replacement, but a guy on the defensive line who can hopefully put up sacks, who can hopefully put up numbers like a younger J.J. Watt. With the 14th overall pick, the Baltimore Ravens select Jermaine Johnson II, an edge rusher out of Florida State. Another guy who killed the combine, killed his pro day, and I think he also raised his stock tremendously. Baltimore doesn't really have a lot in their front 7 at the moment, so I have them taking Jermaine Johnson, who can slide in on the opposite side of Odafe Owe and can add a power aspect to that pass rush to complement Owe's speed and athleticism. Just a best player available for Baltimore. I don't think they really have any drastic needs at the moment, but go out and get Jermaine Johnson and instantly he can come in and he can start and he can really wreak havoc on offensive linemen in that division. With the 15th overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Jamison Williams, a wide receiver out of Alabama. I think he's probably the best deep threat in the entire class, and he was killing everyone during the regular season before sadly tearing his ACL. I mean, I'm a Georgia fan, so him tearing his ACL was kind of a blessing for us, but still sad to see, and I think Philly needs a deep threat, and Jamison Williams is just that. I don't think he ever played with Devontae Smith at Alabama, but they kind of have that connection. So I think he'll be a nice pairing for Devontae Smith, who can do a lot of the underneath stuff, while Jamison Williams blows the top off of defenses. With the 16th overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Andrew Booth Jr., a cornerback out of Clemson. Now, he didn't test at all this year because of, I think, a quad injury. Well, he was hurt, didn't really test at all this offseason, so he is relying on his tape to see where he gets drafted. A long, rangy corner for the Clemson Tigers is now going to Philly. I think they need a solid outside corner opposite Darius Slay, and Andrew Booth can immediately fill that spot. They don't need a slot guy. I think Avonte Maddox fills that role for them perfectly. So get Andrew Booth Jr., who may be a little raw and may not be great right away, but if you have him with Darius Slay, who can teach him and help him develop, you could have a very solid cornerback duo for a couple more years. With the 17th overall pick, the Los Angeles Chargers select Trevor Penning, a tackle out of Northern Iowa. Now, I think this is best player available if I am the Chargers. They released Brian Bulaga this year, so that right tackle spot is pretty bad for them. Penning is a left tackle, I think, but he can easily slide over and play right tackle for them. The Chargers want to compete this year, and they have the team capable of doing it. So get a guy at that right tackle spot just to help protect Justin Herbert, and I think that's probably the smartest pick they could take. They could take a wide receiver, or they could take a lot of picks just to make the team, just to add depth at certain positions, but if they can get a day one starter at right tackle, I think that's a no-brainer. With the 18th overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select Kenny Pickett, a quarterback out of Pittsburgh. Another guy who many believe is the number one overall quarterback in this draft class, but I have him falling all the way to 18. Now, New Orleans did re-sign Jameis Winston, but I don't think he's their quarterback of the future. Get Kenny Pickett. He can sit behind Jameis for a year or even half of the year, and then can immediately be your starter from then on. And they can get rid of Jameis Winston. Just probably the most pro-ready quarterback in this year's draft class, and he's going to New Orleans. Sadly, they don't have Sean Payton anymore, so I'm not sure what the quarterback development is going to be like down there, but New Orleans now gets their quarterback of the future. With the 19th overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select Zion Johnson, a guard out of Boston College. Another guy who really rose his stock during the Combine and his pro day, and he's going to Philly to instantly fill Brandon Brooks' spot at that right guard spot. And I think he would be an instant day one starter for Philly. I trust him a lot more than I trust Nate Herbig or whoever their backup guards are. So I think that's kind of a no-brainer for them. Just get a starter who, along with Landon Dickerson, can really help shore up the inside of that offensive line and can develop for the future for whoever their quarterback is going to be. With the 20th overall pick, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers selecting Trent McDuffie, a cornerback out of Washington. Pittsburgh really doesn't have a lot going for them at corner. They didn't re-sign Joe Hayden as of right now, so bring in Trent McDuffie, who can be your number one or number two corner right away. He's a little bit on the smaller side, but he has great ball skills, and he's really feisty when the ball is in the air. I guess that goes with ball skills, but he's probably the best corner on the board at the moment for Pittsburgh. So get him and just shore up that secondary that is not great other than Minkah Fitzpatrick. With the 21st overall pick, the New England Patriots select Chris Olave, a wide receiver from Ohio State. I think he's the best route runner in the entire class, and he ran extremely fast at the Combine. So this is kind of a luxury pick for the Patriots, who I don't believe have a number one receiver. So have Olave come in, and he can immediately build chemistry with Mac Jones, and then you have your number one wide receiver and your starting quarterback for the next 10, 15 years. You keep them together, they're going to be great. With the 22nd overall pick, the Green Bay Packers select Jordan Davis, a defensive tackle from Georgia. Now, I don't know if he necessarily fits their scheme, but he is a massive body that they can put on that defensive line alongside of Jerron Reed and Kenny Clark. And then I think that defensive line is set. you put whoever you want on the edges, and that defensive line is going to go to work. Jordan Davis is massive, so he's going to take at least one or two offensive linemen every single play, which frees up holes for other guys to go in and get pressure on the quarterback. He's not a huge pass rusher, or he hasn't shown it at least, but I think Green Bay, just not best player available because there are a lot of good guys left, but take Jordan Davis and you have a potential franchise defensive tackle if Kenny Clark ever decides he wants to leave Green Bay. With the 23rd overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals select Boye Mafe, an edge rusher out of Minnesota. Another guy who just absolutely killed the combine, killed his pro day. I think he's like 6'6", 240, 250 pounds, and he ran extremely fast for an edge rusher. So Arizona did lose Chandler Jones, so get Boye Mafe. He can come in. He is a little bit raw, so he might not be great right away, but he can fill Chandler Jones' spot right away and be probably one of the best pass rushers on that entire team. With the 24th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys select George Karlaftis, an edge rusher out of Purdue. After losing Randy Gregory, they need someone on the opposite side of DeMarcus Lawrence, and I believe George Karlaftis, out of the edge rushers available, I think he's probably the best day one starter for them, and he fits their scheme really well. He's a good 4-3 edge rusher, and he's going to be perfect on the opposite side of DeMarcus Lawrence. I think with his size, he might even be able to play a little bit of defensive tackle, but not a lot. But this could have been an offensive lineman, but I think that defensive line is just barren of talent other than DeMarcus Lawrence. So I guess this is just kind of a luxury pick for them, just the rich get richer. I don't know if he'll really make it to 24 in the draft, but if he is, the Dallas Cowboys should run that pick up. With the 25th overall pick, the Buffalo Bills select Kaiir Elam, a cornerback from Florida. Now, Kaiir Elam is arguably, he's not the best corner in the class, but he destroyed the combine. I think 6'2", ran extremely fast, and the Bills need someone opposite Tre'Davious White, and they really got exposed last season when Tre'Davious White was hurt. So bringing Kaiir Elam, who might take a little bit to be great, but he can instantly start alongside Tre'Davious White, and then you have your top two corners who can lock down really any receiver in that division. With the 26th overall pick, the Tennessee Titans select David Ojabo, an edge rusher from Michigan. Now, he is really raw, and I don't know if a lot of his production this year was from just him or if it was more so from Aiden Hutchinson being on the opposite side. But also, he did tear his Achilles a couple weeks ago, which is really unfortunate. If he hadn't tore his Achilles, he probably would have been gone a long time ago. But Tennessee takes him at 26. He obviously won't be able to play or start right away, but they have Bud Dupree, they have Harold Landry, so those two can get it done while David Ojabo is healing. And then when he is back and fully healthy, they can throw him in there in limited snaps and then just give him full reign of the defense. Him and Harold Landry on opposite sides of each other would be terrifying, and then they can move on from Bud Dupree in the offseason. With the 27th overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Kenyon Green. They have a massive hole at left tackle and left guard. I mean, left tackle isn't terrible. Donovan Smith isn't bad, but left guard, they have a massive hole. So Kenyon Green can immediately go in and be an instant starter for them, and then you have arguably the best offensive line in the league. So this is kind of a rich get richer situation. I don't like the pick because I don't want the Bucs to be good, but it's a perfect pick and a perfect fit for them. With the 28th overall pick, the Green Bay Packers select Treylon Burks, a wide receiver out of Arkansas. Now, he probably won't be here in the real draft, but he is one of the best receivers in the entire class. He didn't perform great at the combine, but if you look at his tape, he killed it in arguably the hardest conference in college football. He was killing it against better schools like Alabama. He was amazing against. So Green Bay needs a number one receiver, and Treylon Burks is that guy. And Green Bay isn't like they said that they're going to be very active in looking for a number one receiver. So they may not even have this pick when the draft actually starts because they may trade it. But if Treylon Burks is available at pick 26, I think it's a no-brainer. He can instantly come in and be one of Aaron Rodgers' favorite targets. So take your first round receiver since I think 2002, kind of a no-brainer. With the 29th overall pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select Perion Winfrey, a defensive tackle from Oklahoma. Killed it at the Senior Bowl, killed it at the Combine Pro Day, one of the best defensive linemen in the entire class. And for Kansas City, whose pass rush isn't great, get Perion Winfrey, who can come in and help shore up that defensive line. And with him, they can move on from Kalen Saunders, they can move on from Derek Nottie, or however they want to do it. But he would probably be a day one starter for the Chiefs. With the 30th overall pick, the Chiefs select George Pickens, a wide receiver out of Georgia. Now, Pickens did miss a lot of time this year with an ACL injury, but then he did go to the Combine and ran one of the fastest 40s of all the wide receivers. He's extremely tall, and he's a really, really good deep threat. And for a team that lost Tyreek Hill, I think get George Pickens. He probably won't be your number one receiver right away, but he has the potential to be the best receiver on that team. He's probably better than MVS and McCole Hardman right away, but I think they'll ease him into the team, and then he'll probably be one of Patrick Mahomes' favorite targets right away. With the 31st overall pick, the Cincinnati Bengals select Tyler Linderbaum, a center out of Iowa. Now, their biggest need is offensive line. I know they did sign Ted Karras in free agency, and no offense to him, but I think Tyler Linderbaum would be a better starter for them right away. The best center prospect to come out in a very long time, and he would be a day one starter, in my opinion. I don't know if he has the flexibility to play guard, but if he does, I can see them throwing him over there, but I think he'd be a starter for them right away at center. And then that offensive line is probably close to fixed, if not fixed entirely. And then with the 32nd overall pick, the Detroit Lions select Devin Lloyd, a linebacker out of Utah. The only linebacker I have going in the first round of this mock draft. And Detroit, they just need talent on that roster, so why not go and get Devin Lloyd, who can be one of your starting linebackers immediately, and with Travon Walker can be two of the best front seven players on that team immediately. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer. He's huge. He's extremely athletic, extremely fast. Didn't test extremely well this year, but he is probably the best linebacker in this class. So Detroit, I don't think it's a terrible pick. I don't know if it's a great pick. I don't know if it really fills a need, but I think that team just needs talent, and Devin Lloyd is the best player available. As always, I am your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that former NFL quarterback Matt Flynn retired with only 2,541 career passing yards. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.